Good morning. Before I really get into my presentation today, I just want to take a second to thank NASSH and the 2022 Conference Organising Committee for the opportunity to present a portion of my work once again, and just how privileged I feel to be included in this session alongside Dr. Richard Norton and coincidentally my supervisor, Dr. Jane Hunt. This is now my second NASSH, and I really value the opportunity that the conference and the organisation offer graduate students to share and continue their research alongside such established academics. So for that, I want to say a huge thank you. The idea for this presentation today came out of a section of my PhD thesis, which is currently in writing. The thesis itself sits somewhere at the cross-section of sports history, cultural studies, sociology, and a little bit of linguistics. With the focus on Australia, it looks to research and understand notions of national identity as presented firsthand by athletes as compared to the presentation of that same identity through public discourse in the form of print newspaper articles. The latter part of this project is quite straightforward. I use critical discourse analysis, borrowing from methodologies from the Vienna School of Critical Discourse Analysis to evaluate collated Australian newspaper articles from the past decade. However, to understand how athletes view their national identity takes a little more work. This work is grounded in Adrian Smith and Dilwyn Porter's argument that athletes are likely to have an increasingly complex relationship between their own identity and that of the nation state they represent. It is also supported by Philip Smith and Tim Phillips' call for qualitative research in national identity research in the Australian context, and Daniel A. Nathan's call for non-traditional research methods when studying the nexus of sport and society. Finally, Stephen Carl Arch notes that narratives regarding sport are often approached from the perspective of an outsider, and as such are limited in that they cannot, and often do not, frame the protagonist and their lived experience at the centre of the history. What I have done to draw the experience of self was conduct a series of oral histories with 16 Australian Olympic and Paralympic medalists from the last 3 Summer Olympic and Paralympic Games. These athletes range from well-known household names to little-known paracyclists. Each of these oral histories yielded diverse and individualised insights. Some were highly informative and rich, with both primary context for the record and secondary data for deeper analysis. Others served as little more than a regurgitation of pre-existing anecdotes relying on established narratives and tropes. Regardless, they each offered insight into both the participants' perception of self and their relationship to the nation state, and by extension, their imagined communities. Although I could go into details about my analysis of these oral histories, and likely will do so in future work, including my thesis, today I wanted to take the opportunity to discuss and share a portion of my methods. Unlike traditional oral histories, due to the COVID-19 pandemic and ongoing travel restrictions both within Australia and the broader world, the recording of my sessions were unable to be taken in person. As such, it was determined in the early stages of this project that video conferencing software, in this case Microsoft Teams, was the best solution moving forward. This adoption of technology to fit the needs of my research could, on the surface, raise questions of major methodological issues and call into question later analysis and findings. The argument could be made that by removing traditional face-to-face oral history methods, a deep understanding of both the participant and the topic could be lost. It could also be argued that by introducing a third figure in the conversation, in this case the computer and the internet, that the integrity of study is flawed. And although all these perspectives have merit, I found in my experience and with this topic that conducting oral histories virtually through video conferencing in truth offers a unique set of clear advantages for cultural studies scholars and historians. Today I wanted to talk about 4 of these self-perceived advantages and draw from experiences from my own work that could help support each point. One point that I will not focus on, but I want to raise nevertheless, was the simple fact that this approach to conducting oral histories without a doubt will assist in the democratization of our work as academics and allow more voices and more viewpoints and experiences into our work. It allows us to conduct our work without expensive travel and without taking significant time out of our own lives and those of our participants. In short, it just makes it easier in a practical and financial sense. With that being said, let's move on to my first point, what I believe is to be a heightened consciousness of self. I found that we cannot talk about identity as an objective observer or researcher, as the topic itself is deeply personal. As such, a transparent acknowledgement of self, or at least the attempt of such an acknowledgement, must precede any formal analysis or conclusion making. It serves as a starting point to admitting that any claim of unshakable objectivity in the study of identity is fraught, and rather that all study and writing on the subject is influenced with a healthy dose of individualism, not often admitted by traditional academics and specifically sports scholars. Through conducting these oral histories via video conference, I had a physical reflection of self. And although I would caution not to spend too much time looking at oneself's reflection, it certainly did allow for a certain sense of self-reflectiveness in both the act of recording and the review of that recording after the fact. Certain reactions and mannerisms from myself allowed me to take note of my own biases more than a simple audio recording would. This no doubt developed a great sense of self-consciousness as I moved through my own research. The second perceived benefit to conducting oral histories via video conference that I wanted to touch on was the ability to comfortably give participants the space to talk without interruption. Often in face-to-face settings, as the interviewer, one can feel the need to agree with or support the points that the participant is making. One can even slide quickly into finding words for the participant without offering the participant the opportunity to find the words themselves. There is no doubt that such interjections did little in the way of recognizing and curbing inherent research biases. Through my research, I found that both myself and the participant developed a common sense and comfort with silence. For the most part, the conversations flowed when we each allowed the other to complete their own sentences without interjecting or suggesting words in place of voids. This could well be a symptom of our acceptance with technical delays or mishaps. There was, in essence, just a clear acceptance of pause. On the topic of comfort, this digital forward method allowed for participants to choose their very own setting. On some occasions, my participants decided to sit at their home office, and in others, they decided that the lounge room or a quiet place in their workplace or training environment was best suited. In one case, I conducted an oral history with an athlete that was in hotel quarantine, and in another, the athlete was comfortably lounging on their couch at home. The participants were able to find their individual selves in their individual settings and spaces. However, what I think was more beneficial about the personalized environment was the fact that neither my own environment nor that of my participant was encroached upon by the other. Each of us felt comfortable in our own physical spaces without the need to make the other feel comfortable in that same space as well. I think that separation and lack of caution did wonders for my data collection and work, and I highly recommend finding individualized spaces moving forward. The final key benefit that I found through my oral history methods that I wanted to touch on today was the way in which the computer served as an opaque barrier between myself and my participants. I found that this barrier, both physical and metaphorical, allowed for my participants to speak freely without the risk of immediate judgment or conclusions reflected from my end. Because we were not able to make proper eye contact, and I would argue that looking at each other's eyes on a screen does not constitute proper eye contact, I believe at times my participants almost forgot that they were talking to an audience rather than a computer. It also allowed for my participants to disregard that they were being recorded. In some sense, the recording became more intimate because the space was filled by only one person and not both parties in the conversation. I want to make it clear that this was not a concerted effort to pull the wool over anyone's eyes, but rather the participants were given the opportunity to record what they wanted to. It very much became their own oral history. I think because of this, that it was a great strength in the produced recordings. With all that being said, I do want to highlight and recognize there are some significant concerns with conducting oral histories, or for that matter, any substantial qualitative research method through video conferencing. There can be technical issues with researcher or participant tools such as the internet, recording devices, or quite frankly, poor equipment. The participant can easily become distracted or become quickly fatigued by talking through a digital forum. It can at times be hard to develop a level of comfort and familiarity between the researcher and the participant. All of these points certainly came up in the recording of my 16 oral histories and will no doubt come up in the future in recording oral histories through video conferencing software. This is all to say that yes, there are drawbacks, but with acknowledgement and acceptance of both the pros and the cons, researchers and especially student researchers should be able to make informed decisions on what methods are best suited for their work without being hamstrung by traditional avenues, which can be both costly and at times ineffective. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. I hope that this presentation today has at least started a bit of a conversation within some of your own heads about reevaluating how you conduct some of your qualitative research. I think it allows a lot of young students and academics the opportunity to go explore different avenues of research and not be stuck in one certain way of thinking. Yes, there are drawbacks to using technology, but I think if we effectively embrace it, there are ways that we can not only partake our research in times of need, but also improve upon it and find new exciting ways to do what we do best. So I thank you all for the opportunity to speak, and I look forward to hearing your questions.